and welcome to the Save Ourselves podcast, or SOP as I like to call it in short. And I am your host Aparna, and today we are going to get started with the very first episode. So, if you haven't checked it out yet, I posted a trailer episode a few days back, I think a couple of weeks back, and it basically encapsulates what the podcast is going to be about and what I do on here. And even though we don't have a very concrete plan for the podcast yet, it sort of gives you an idea of what was going through my mind before recording it and why I wanted to launch a podcast. And it's like a summary of everything that went behind the scenes before this podcast. So if you're interested, you can go check that out and then come back to this video. But without much ado, let's get started with our very first episode. Yay! Alright, so the topic for today's video, I said video, this is a podcast, wow. So, the topic for today's podcast is February is always my January. I actually just finished recording a YouTube video on this very topic a few minutes back, that's why it's in the noodle. But anyway, I wanted to sort of make my comeback on YouTube and the launch of the first episode on the same topic so that everything is in sync. And with the YouTube video, I have sort of like tried to condense my thoughts and keep it a little bit shorter, but as you all know, I love to ramble and I have a problem keeping things concise and condensed, and brevity is always an issue with me. I'm a woman of a lot of words, and if you're friends with me, then you might know the big paragraphs that I text. So let's forgive that and move on. Anyway, so moving on to February is always my January. I wanted to make a podcast on this episode, like on this topic, because I think this has been a very prominent theme in the past few years of my life. For example, I got my very first job a couple of years back in February. Then I got my second job last year in February. Both of them basically started on the same date. And now this year, I am making a few changes to my freelance practice in February. So this has been a very prominent and consistent theme in my year. So I have a lot of basically life evidence to, make justice to this theme and make like a podcast episode and a YouTube video on the same topic. So that's what I want to talk about, because I feel like there are a few people out there who might relate to this as well. And I think that's the truth, because I have been watching a lot of creators on YouTube talk about their January recap and how they're going into February and all of that. And this has been a very consistent theme across everyone, like even with people that I know. A few people around me have made changes to their lives in January that they could not have predicted while they, set out into the year. So a lot of things actually, get finalized and get concrete during the month, which actually alter the course of your year. So it's very hard to predict these changes before and set out with your like New Year's resolutions and your plans finalized on day one of the new year. I'm going to take a brief pause because I think there's some construction work going on and I don't want to make this podcast a very hard thing to listen to. I'm sure my rambling will do that for half of you. So let's just take a brief pause and come back. All right, so we are back, and I don't think there was any pause for you, it's just for me. And I'm also sorry if there's any background noise going on, because I'm trying to record at optimal times, but it's very hard to have like a schedule because there's construction going on right opposite my house. Anyway, let's get into the details of this episode. So what we're going to do is go through what January, stands for and what we think it's supposed to be like, but how it actually ends up becoming like. And then we're going to get into why I think February is my January. And I think it's the case for a lot of people. So why February can be a January. So let's get started with what January stands for. So I think that January is always like the Monday of the year, and we are very like critical on ourselves when we are, starting out the new year. Maybe some of us are like pumped to get started and have these resolutions in place, have a lot of goals and new routines, new habits, etc. And maybe some of us are not looking forward as much, and we just want to, get a move with the year and just get going and just let ourselves be. But I think no matter what our outlook is towards the year, I think January ends up being a very critical sort of month for everyone, because people are a little bit too hard on themselves. They are just back from their December, which is always like a crazy month. Like, no matter what you do, like whether you're a business person or as someone at a job or a student, or like whatever you do with your life, December, I think, always tends to be a very socially busy season, or like you're spending time with your family, you're meeting friends, there are tons of weddings or social events, parties, the holidays, like everything is happening. And with that in place, you're also trying to close off the year on a good note, do some reflection if possible, just take stock of the year that went by. So I think December is just like a very blurry month, no matter how good or bad it goes for you. And with that, what everyone is looking for in January is like a fresh start, like a clean slate, and just get going with the new year. So, yeah, like I said, some people are more optimistic than others and are looking for like the January 1st, like the calendar to turn, when they'll start, hitting the gym or having all these resolutions in place. And some of them do let themselves be a little bit more, show themselves a little bit of grace. But no matter which category you fall into, I think we're still very critical of ourselves. Like, it's a very expectations filled month in terms of what we expect from ourselves, not even like the rest of the world. It's just that we have this tendency of associating the new year with sort of a new identity, no matter how strictly you follow that. So I feel like we have this tendency to kind of be a little bit harder on ourselves in January. And that's, I think, where everything goes wrong. Like, there are all of these there's all of this content out there about, setting goals or setting like new resolutions, having like new year new me or new year better me, or all of this is out there. People are also avidly watching that. Like, even I watch a lot of that content in January, like I won't lie. And I'm not saying that it's bad. It's great to have that motivation in place to get going, to hit the ground running on January 1st. I think that's always a great thing to do. But I just think it's not the most sustainable move to do. What I mean is that you should lean into that, like, newfound motivation. That's what I did this year to get into like a better groove for 2024, because I was having a very hard time while closing off the year, and I just wanted to turn the page and start a fresh chapter when the new year started. So yes, it's obviously great to lean into that new year and find that motivation and get that from many places, find inspiration, and just find better ways to start the year. However, what I feel the month should be like is, it should be like a test drive. So imagine like you're buying a new car, there's this new shiny car in front of you, which you are already more hopeful about because the one that you had is now pretty old, you've used it for a long time, and it's time for an upgrade. That's what a new year also feels like. But that doesn't mean that once you just like sit in the car, you're gonna buy it and get started. There's always this test drive that's necessary to feel it out, check out what features it has, check out what upgrade it's going to offer you, check out how better it is actually from the one that you previously had. So I think January should be like a test drive. So yes, like have all of your new plans and routines and resolutions in place, but don't finalize them there and then. I think we should take like the first 31 days of the month to just sort of test these things out. Is this new routine working out? Is my resolution too ambitious? Is it too unattainable? Is it too easy for me? Is it too challenging for me? So I think these are some of the questions that we can just sort of play with in our mind, let them simmer, let them brew a little bit as we test out the things that we want to do. And it's a great month for that actually. Like it's the perfect month to like get a lay of the land and get a feel of what the year is going to look like. Just feel the vibes. Like, does this feel like a great year? What kind of vibes are we going into it? What's like our physical state? What's our mental state? How are we really feeling about the new year? So I think January should also be a month of transition. Like I always call December the Sunday of the year, which is more of a transition day where you're trying to close out the last week and you're trying to prepare for the new week, but you're also trying to rest. So there's a lot happening in December. Like there's always a lot happening on a Sunday, even if you have no plans. Like mentally, I always feel like there's a lot going on in our minds, preparing for the new week and trying to let go of the week that passed by. So I think, like December, January is also a month of flux, a month of transition, because we've not yet closed everything that we wanted to do in the year. Maybe we're using that month to close out a few things, to wrap up the year, or to just get some final details in place, because we before we can close a few doors or close a few chapters for good. So I think it's like a period of settling down, finally letting out a sigh, finally just letting yourself be, or like more of recovering from the year that passed and just preparing yourself for the one that's coming. So I feel like it should be treated as a month of settling down and just trying to find your spot, like your calm spot from all of this chaos that happened during the past year. Like, no matter how good or bad your year went, I'm not saying that this should be the case only when you've had like a very tough year or something. I think it's just like you should let your body, your mind, your soul get acclimatized to the new year, or get acquainted with what's coming and what's happening and what's changing. So it's just a good month to let yourself be and just find your footing in the new year. But I feel like we end up doing like we always end up doing the exact opposite of this. Instead of taking that day to acclimatize, or like taking the month to acclimatize, we start off at like the speed of 100. We just want to put the foot to the pedal and just get going. We don't want to take that period of pondering or rest, or it's not even about rest. I think more of testing out the features of this new car, or or like going on that test drive. I think we're just so eager to get on the road that we don't give ourselves that grace period of test driving. Like even when you start a new job, you have this probation period. So why does not a new year have a probation period? I think we can look at January as that probation period of just seeing what the year is going to be like, how it feels, because I believe in that. I believe that the year feels different. Like each year feels different from the other, no matter how you've spent it. Like maybe your 2 calendar years could look the exact same, let's say if you're in the same state or chapter of life. But I feel like no matter how monotonous or how regular or how consistent your routines or your life are is, oh, I'm not sure at this point, but I feel that no 2 years feel and look the same. So I feel like January is the month where we can actually use that time and space to just settle down into that new year and new phase of life, and just let ourselves be, instead of what we usually do of like just hit the ground and just start going from day one. Because I feel like things change so much. So let's say that you have everything pat down in the first week of the year, you have all your plans set, you have all your goals planned out, your intentions for the year, and then things change suddenly. Because a lot of people are trying to make changes in the new year. Like that's like a big motivator. When people say new year new me, it's because they want new things in their life as well. Maybe they're trying to switch out their jobs, maybe they're trying to launch a business, maybe they're trying to change what they're doing with their career, or have some sort of pivot in their personal lives, in their professional lives. Or for students, for example, the semester is changing, so it's like a fresh start for them anyway. So I feel like January anyway brings about a lot of changes for us, no matter what. Maybe some people are moving apartments. Like, even in my own friend circle and the people around me, I've seen so many people have these changes in their life that they had no idea about, or they had not even predicted or anticipated. And had they, put down their plans in like concrete places in the first week or like first few days of the month, that wouldn't have worked out, because now things are so different than what they imagined it to be. And that's not saying that, if you do your planning in February and March, things won't change or things are going to work out exactly like that. Of course, that's not true. That's life. Like, you cannot, no matter how much you plan, it's not going to go your way. Like, we all know that. But what I just mean is that before we get to planning or before we get to setting intentions for the year, it's necessary to just live a little in that year and then decide of like what exactly do I want this year to look like. Because coming from December, we have the experience of the year that has passed and we are in that mindset. So we are making those plans based on what has passed and not based on where we are right now. In December, we are very eager to close out that chapter and get started with the new thing. So in January, I feel we should just, let ourselves just be calm and just live day to day without much thought, and just let everything that's coming up come up. If you are questioning some of your habits, let that sit in your brain for a while. If you are feeling inspired to make some changes, let that sit in your brain for a while. Like, let things simmer, let things brew in your mind, because by the time you come to February, and that's the next chapter that of the podcast that we're getting into, by the time you get into February, you have the opportunity to turn all of that chaos into calm and actually get a move on things. So now that we know that what January typically looks like and what we can make it look like, let's see what February should look like and how we can make the most of it, and how February can be our January. All right. So now let's take a look at February. So I think February is associated with feelings of love and compassion, and because it's Valentine's Day in that month, the whole month is sort of, commercialized to and associated with those feelings. So I feel like instead of cringing about it, or trying to run away from those types of themes, I think we can actually lean into it, but in a different aspect. I'm not asking you to make this month about love in terms of romantic love, but I think this is a great month to practice some self compassion, self acceptance, and just be a little more gentler towards yourself. For instance, if you have spent January being very harsh on yourself or being critical that things are not happening the way that I anticipated them to be, or if January was overall a hard month for you, which I think it tends to be for a lot of us, then I think February is a good month to have a little reset, be a little kinder to yourself, be a little more gentle, and just show yourself some grace and love and compassion. Because I think now that we have lived through a solid month and we know where we are and how, we fit into the routines. So, okay, so there's this podcast called Working Title by Margot Lee. And in her latest episode, what she said was that we tend to make our goals, and like we try to do all of this planning in January based on our future selves, or like our ideal selves, of like how I want to be, or how my ideal self looks like, or what is she going to do with all of these habits or with all of these plans and dreams and goals that she has. But we forget to take into account the person that we are right now and the shortcomings we have basis that ideal person. So of course you are not your ideal self right now. There's like this big gap in between. However, you're not making the goals based on the person you are now. Rather, you're making the goals based on the person you want to be. And that's fine, because aspiration is what, takes you ahead, and it what give us it's what gives us that motivation to move forward. However, when we have taken that test drive in January with all of that ambitious goal setting, we also come to terms with our real selves and who we actually are, and how we may or may not fall short of the person we are trying to become. And it's not to say that you're never going to become that person or you should stop trying, but rather to allow yourself some space and time to incorporate like who you really are. Like your goals can also be aligned with the person you are as of now, and let that person get accustomed to the habits or the routines that your ideal self will have, and just like take small incremental steps to become that person. What we end up doing in January is just trying to close that gap as fast or as soon as possible. And I think that's where the self criticism or that harshness comes from. And so in February, we can, collect ourselves a little, show ourselves a little more love, and say that, okay, I've tried my best, I've tested out these routines for the like a whole month, and this is what I'm understanding. Or like I've tried to work out and it's been going great, or it's not been going that great. I've tried to eat better, and this is what I found out about myself. Like, for example, in my personal experience, when I have like a nice breakfast, I tend to be more in control of like what I'm eating throughout the day, or then like I eat a little less than I typically would with when I don't have breakfast. Like if I don't have breakfast, then I tend to keep on snacking throughout the day, or I'll find some treats here and there, or I'll want to have like another snack after dinner or something. So like these are the things that you understand about yourself only after you've observed yourself. So January is that self observation month, and now that you're into February, you can take notes, or you can take stock of who this person is and how you've tried to keep up with your goals and how it's going, and just do like a little bit of a reset. What you can use February for is to revisit all of your thoughts. So remember how I said about if something comes up in January, just let it brew and simmer. Now it's time to take it into consideration and make sense of it. So now, after a month in, you might understand yourself a little bit better and see what works, what doesn't work, where tweaks need to be made, what needs to be scrapped completely, or what needs to be added or subtracted. So you can use this month to make more of concrete plans, make more of your goals into like actionable steps or into systems. And basically, like after you've done your test drive, now is the time you can decide if you want to buy that car or if you want to buy another one, or what kind of changes or decisions you basically want to make. So I think February is a great way. Now that we've converted that chaos into calm, we can use this calm state of mind to make better, more rational decisions with the information and evidence that we have of the month that has passed. So when I say that February is my January and February can be your January as well, what I mean is, let's use January as month 0 instead of month 1, and then let's start from like place 1 or month 1 in February. Let's just use January as a buffer to try things out, to test them out, and just get a feel, get a lay of the land, and just get our bearings in place for this new year. And now that we're into February, we can move forward with more bold steps. And I think that's what I am planning to do as well. Like, for instance, after I'm done recording this podcast, maybe I'll edit a bit. But today I've saved the day to, get started with my planning, things for my business, things for my personal life. So I have made all of these pages and spreads in my bullet journal, or a few pages in my Notion as well, right in January. So I did set up a few systems in January and then I tested them out. But now that it's February, I'm ready to take those onto paper and onto my Notion and just chalk them out. And of course, things are still gonna change. Like, I'm still in the middle of a few changes that I'm making to my life, and things could also, turn topsy turvy tomorrow, and my plans could just be thrown out of the window. But now that I have a little bit of experience of the year, now I can take this and make a little bit better, maybe decisions or some concrete steps that I can personally take for the things that are in my control. Like now I have a better sense of the things that are in my control and I can steer them in a better direction. So that's what I mean when I say February is my January. And now I think by this point the podcast is getting a little bit too long. So I'm gonna let you go. And I would suggest that if you had, fun listening to this podcast and if things made a little bit of sense, then let this sit in your brain for a little while and just consider what I'm trying to say. If you relate to this at all, then use the weekend or use the coming, even like 2 weeks that are left of February to 3 weeks, 2 weeks. Okay, well, use whatever's left of February to, make some like consolidate your plans and set your intentions for the rest of the year and just do like a better planning. Or you can, if you have already done your planning in January, what you can do is revisit those plans and see if you need to make any edits. So yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. January can be your draft one, and then February can be when you edit and finalize that draft. That's a good way to look at it. I like that. So yeah, I hope you found something insightful from this video, and I hope that I wasn't too rambly in this podcast. And if I was, please show me some grace and allow me some getting used to, because right now I'm talking into thin air and there's no one in front of me. I'm just talking into my mic and recording on my phone. So allow me a few more episodes to get used to this process and let me articulate better. I promise I'll get a little better at it. So yeah, I hope my rambling wasn't too unbearable for you and that you enjoyed this podcast. If you are listening on Spotify, I would love if you could, give me a rating, because it helps me it helps my podcast to get discovered by newer audiences. And yeah, so I'm going to leave a question on Spotify down below, and which will be related to this topic. So feel free to answer that. And I'll see you in the next episode very, very soon. Let me know if you like this video, and yeah, I'll see you next time. Bye bye.